Nirvana lead singer and chief songwriter Kurt Cobain struggled mightily with stardom and often bore the weight of his generation's problems. Sadly, these pressures became too much, and Cobain took his own life in April 1994. Here's how his tragic final days played out. In September 1992, Vanity Fair published a profile of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, which detailed the couple's experiences with heroin and strongly suggested that Love used the drug while pregnant with daughter Frances Bean. Shortly after the issue hit newsstands, Child Welfare Services temporarily removed the infant from her parents' custody. After a family court decision in late March 1993, Los Angeles officially ended its supervision of the Cobain household. All was apparently well and good for about 6 weeks. On May 2, 1993, Cobain returned to the family's Seattle home trembling and in a dazed state. Love determined that her husband was exhibiting the telltale signs of a heroin overdose and tried to end the incident by orally administering a Valium, 3 Benadryl tablets, and 4 Tylenols with codeine added, as well as injecting a dose of buprenorphine, a controlled substance that can reverse the effects of too many opioids. Cobain recovered and wasn't arrested, even though the ensuing police report cited his heroin use. Just over a month later, on June 4, 1993, police once again visited the home at Love's request. The couple had engaged in a heated argument, after which Cobain was charged with domestic assault and had his guns confiscated. Love said the fight started over Cobain's gun ownership, while Cobain later told a friend that it was a confrontation over his drug use. Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love were grunge rock's king and queen. The pair married in early 1992, just a few months after Love's band Hole released their first album, Pretty on the Inside. That group signed with DGC for their second LP and major label debut, Live Through This, and by the time recording began, Nirvana were massively popular in their own right. As Cobain was close with much of the band, it was a no-brainer for Hole to involve Cobain in the creation of the new record. Seeing and enjoying Radiohead's summer 1993 MTV hit Creep, Cobain suggested the band bring in Paul Q. Coldery and Sean Slade, who had co-produced the band's debut album, Pablo Honey. As Love and Cobain adjusted to being new parents while living in Los Angeles, the rest of Hole rehearsed at a studio in Cobain's Seattle area home. Attempts were made for Cobain to perform on the album, but they didn't go so well. Drummer Patty Schemmel later recalled, "I remember he was on so much Klonopin, mumbling harmonies over a couple songs." Forever the younger and hipper alternative to the much more mainstream Grammy Awards, the MTV Video Music Awards celebrated its 10th iteration in September 1993. The evening confirmed Seattle as the dominant musical hotspot of the early 90s as grunge bands won big. Pearl Jam took home 4 Moon Man statuettes, while Nirvana won Best Alternative Video for In Bloom. But it was Kurt Cobain who stole the show. Cobain treated the VMAs like he did all the other trappings of rock star fame, with humor and a decided lack of formality. On the red carpet, he somehow stole the focus away from the likes of more fabulously dressed celebrities by dressing in a striped shirt and sporting messy hair. He also brought along wife Courtney Love and their baby Frances Bean Cobain, who mugged for cameras and rode around on her dad's shoulders. Although Cobain seemed to be having fun, the reality is that he really didn't want to be there. Nirvana manager Danny Goldberg later told The Hollywood Reporter there was a lot of pressure from MTV for him to attend. He wasn't crazy about the idea of award shows, but he liked having his videos played on MTV, and he didn't want to piss them off. By the fall of 1993, Nirvana was one of the biggest bands in the world, with a highly anticipated follow-up to Nevermind primed for release. On September 25, 1993, Cobain and company locked down one of music's most prestigious gigs, a guest appearance on the season premiere of Saturday Night Live. The host that evening was NBA star Charles Barkley, upon whom Nirvana certainly made an impression. He told Dan Patrick,
"I didn't know anything about Nirvana. First of all, they were fantastic. All the guys were nice, and I think Courtney was there also."
The host and band dressing rooms were adjacent, and Barkley kept his door open because he had people coming in and out. Nirvana's members kept theirs shut, however, mostly because they were smoking marijuana in there.
Every time those guys from Nirvana opened their locked door, I got like a contact high.
In November 1993, Nirvana enjoyed a rite of passage reserved only for the most important rock stars of the era. They got to record an episode of Unplugged, the MTV concert series where bands play acoustic versions of their biggest songs. At Sony Music Studios in New York City, and with a band bolstered by additional guitarist Pat Smear, cellist Laurie Goldston, and members of the Meat Puppets, Cobain wailed his way through gently strummed and lightly drummed versions of Nirvana classics. These included All Apologies, On a Plane, and Come As You Are. Cobain even gently tweaked the format of the show to make it more special. He helped design the set, ensuring that it was covered in black candles and lilies, and eschewed Nirvana's substantial catalog in favor of covers, including 3 Meat Puppet songs, Lead Belly's Standard, Where Did You Sleep Last Night, and David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. Later released in an edited form as MTV Unplugged in New York, the performance went 5 times platinum and won Nirvana their only Grammy for Best Alternative Music Album. Having helped to popularize grunge with their 1991 album Nevermind, Nirvana's next album was hotly anticipated to say the least. And in September 1993, In Utero sold 180,000 copies in its first week and debuted at number 1 on the Billboard album chart. But it's remarkable that anybody got to hear the record at all. The band's label DGC didn't like it, and Kurt Cobain and Nirvana headed into the studio to quickly remix the album, hiring famed REM producer Scott Litt to do so after original producer Steve Albini refused to return. When it was released, Kmart and Walmart initially wouldn't stock the album, being squeamish about its ghoulish cover art. To spread the word of In Utero, Nirvana set off on their first large-scale tour in 2 years. But this tour was not without its problems. At one of the first stops, the band's vocal and guitar monitors were so problematic as to cause the packed-in audience to boo the band. A planned 6-week European leg of the tour wasn't even completed after Cobain came down with a case of bronchitis that worsened severely at a gig in Munich that March. A few days later, he fell ill in Rome, and those personal health reasons would mark the end of the In Utero promotional swing. The In Utero tour landed Kurt Cobain in Rome in early March 1994. That's where he nearly died, too, after falling into a coma. Having ingested a number of pills in his hotel room, paramedics rushed Cobain to the emergency room at a nearby hospital. His stomach was pumped and cleared of what doctors said were anti-influenza and throat health drugs. About 12 hours later, Cobain seemed to be recovering. Nirvana manager Janet Billig said at the time, "Kurt opened his eyes, he moved his fingers, and he responded to his name. Those are good signs. It's very serious, but based on what we've been told by the doctors, we are optimistic that he will make a full recovery." The truth was, however, that Cobain had actually attempted suicide. Courtney Love told Rolling Stone in 1994 that Cobain had grown extremely depressed on the road, so she joined him in Rome. Later that night, Love awoke to find Cobain missing from bed. She explained, "He was at the end of the bed with $1,000 in his pocket and a note saying, 'You don't love me anymore. I'd rather die than go through a divorce.'" Love said that Cobain had ingested 50 pills out of what she called a definite suicidal urge. Rolling Stone confirmed that the pills pumped from the singer's stomach were Rohypnol, a powerful tranquilizer. Nirvana was on the verge of flaming out in early 1994. On top of Cobain's drug problems, the band's members were eager to pursue professional lives outside of Nirvana, such as solo work. Dave Grohl had quietly written and recorded demos of several songs, and Cobain was working on a standalone project too. According to Hole guitarist and Cobain friend Eric Erlandson, Cobain was in the midst of working on a solo LP. Erlandson told Fuse it would have been his White album. The guitarist added that he was really excited about some of the stuff he saw Cobain play, and he revealed that the album featured at least one cover of a famous song, the exact identity of which has never been revealed. Just a few weeks after Kurt Cobain's attempt to take his own life in March 1994, Courtney Love tried to arrange an intervention with counselor Stephen Chadoff in order to help her husband deal with his many demons. Chadoff told Rolling Stone, "They called me to see what could be done. He was using up in Seattle. He was in full denial. It was very chaotic, and they were in fear for his life." In advance of the intervention, Chadoff consulted a number of Cobain's friends and relatives, one of whom tipped off the singer, leading to a cancellation. After firing Chadoff, Nirvana's management company arranged for another intervention at Cobain's home in Seattle. About a dozen people attended the intense 5-hour meeting on March 25, 1994, including Love, Nirvana bassist Chris Novoselic, and the band's occasional guitarist Pat Smear. A number of ultimatums were issued to Cobain. Should he not seek medical and professional assistance in the form of checking into a drug rehab facility, Novoselic and Smear said they'd dissolve Nirvana, and Love said she'd leave him.
Yes, I told him he had dropped the baby. And I was mean about it. I wasn't really mean, but I wasn't nice about it.
And you think that's why he did it? Because you
I think
said
that's
to him,
a major reason.
Courtney.
I do. I think that's a major reason.
Love then flew to Los Angeles and enrolled herself in a drug rehab program. Cobain stayed behind in Seattle and dropped by the home of a friend to ask for a gun, ostensibly to scare off trespassers on his property. Together, they bought a 20-gauge shotgun and ammunition. Cobain then left the gun at home before boarding a flight to LA to enter rehab.
I shouldn't have called for an intervention. I just panicked.
Cobain acquiesced to the wishes of his wife and bandmates, and in late March 1994, he flew to Los Angeles to check into the Exodus Recovery Center in Marina del Rey, California. On April 1st, he called Courtney Love, reportedly telling her, "Just remember, no matter what, I love you." That would mark the final conversation between Cobain and Love. Later that day, at about 7:30 p.m., Cobain informed an Exodus staff member that he was going outside to smoke a cigarette, but instead managed to scale the 6-foot-tall brick wall that surrounds the property. The following day, Love hired private investigators to find Cobain and canceled his credit cards. By that point, he had returned to Seattle, where he was purportedly spotted by one of his daughter's nannies. His location still in doubt on April 4th, Cobain's mother, Wendy O'Connor, reported him missing, suggesting that her son could be suicidal or might be out trying to score drugs. Other accounts say Cobain wandered around a Seattle park and spent some time at his other home outside Seattle, in the town of Carnation. According to a police report, on April 8, 1994, the body of the Nirvana frontman was discovered in the greenhouse of his home on Lake Washington in Seattle by an electrician who had been hired to work on a security system.
The lead singer of the enormously popular rock band Nirvana is dead. Apparently, he was a suicide at the age of 27.
Near to Cobain was a 20-gauge shotgun with expended shells, and he had suffered a head wound, evidence of a self-inflicted gunshot as the cause of death. He left a note addressed to Bada, a comforting childhood imaginary friend, and signed it, "Peace, Love, Empath." He also addressed his wife, "Please keep going, Courtney," for Frances. If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, 8255.